That's amazing. Really lifelike.
Yeah, it's a stunning reconstruction, isn't it?
How did they do it?
Well, they had the skull,
Right.
and they've just got really good at doing this stuff now.
They want us to believe that this 4,500-year-old mummy looked like this. Really? Is this really what he looked like?
True, especially here the DNA that showed that from this Nuwayrat man, 80% was related actually from Egypt.
But when you actually look at the evidence with an unfiltered lens,
how have we not had any ancient DNA from Egypt before? But it is almost the first one. So
we analyze in detail the Nuwayrat mummy. After looking at these results, you will understand why this mummy was chosen as the poster child of the genetic identity of early ancient Egypt. Although, once we go through the data and what it really means, I promise you, you will never again trust scientists and the whole Egyptian antiquities department. When you search for 4,500-year-old mummy with complete genome, one of the top results is a BBC article on the matter. Nowhere in this article is the name Africa mentioned, not even once. Mesopotamia shows up all over the article. Asia shows up. Fertile Crescent shows up. But somehow the very continent where this civilization is from doesn't show up once. And it is directly in line with the Nature paper that states that the mummy was 80% Neolithic North African. And if their implications weren't so insidious, they would be shameful and ironic. Shameful because they tried to make it seem like a significant part of the genome of Nuwayrat came from ancestral Western Asia. And by doing so, they actually proved that not only ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, was black, but also the ancient Levant was black. When we dive into his phenotype and his genetic markers, you will notice that his teeth are black African, his cranium is black African, his limb proportions are black African, his ears, his cheekbones, his skin, his hair, his blood type, and pretty much all his differentiating genetic markers. All of it points to the same conclusion. But before all this, there is a term that keeps coming back in the analysis of the Nuwayrat mummy, and it comes in multiple variations, the famous Neolithic North African. But what does it really mean? Well, you are going to love this. The algorithm tells me that 61% of you are watching my videos without being subscribed, but if you want to help the channel, any small donation, no matter how small, helps us get access to research articles, and it helps us remain independent so that we can speak our truth freely. It seems every effort in the world was made to ensure there is no association of this mummy with anything that could point to black people. In fact, in the genetic map table, you will notice that almost all ethnicities are clearly identifiable, even those that are on the extreme east of Asia. But yet, the one ethnicity that we know looked exactly like all the statues of the pharaohs from the Old Kingdom is missing. The one ethnicity who was repeatedly, uniformly, and consistently described by contemporaries and by themselves as looking like the ancient Egyptians, the Kemetyu. That ethnicity is missing. Don't believe me? Here are the statues of Old Kingdom kings. Here is King Narmer, founder of Egypt. Here's Pepi I. Here's Djoser. Here's Khafre, and I could go on and on and on. Notice that these are all kings of the most early period in Egypt, the time right before the pyramids were built, so they can be considered as the founding fathers of Egypt. All of them look like the ethnicity that happens to be missing in their analysis. Well, isn't that strange? In its stead, they have coined the affectionate term Neolithic North African, a term who, without clear discernment, would indicate to the reader that the Nuwayrat mummy was at least of Levantine or modern-day Arab descent. Let's verify that. Let's listen to Dr. Thomas Brophy describe the people who lived in North Africa during that period.
Discovered in 2007. We went there, we were the second group to go there in 2008. We went with the discoverer of the cave. It has on the ceiling very beautiful prehistoric rock art depicting the people who lived there and their raising of cattle and various domestic scenes and that sort of thing.
We're talking about black Africans.
Yes. Yes.
In this area. As I understand it, Egyptian archaeologists and Egyptologists have largely suggested that the ancient Egyptian culture developed independently of black Africa. That's sort of the conventional viewpoint.
Yes, that's sort of the conventional view that had been followed. And recently, though, it is changing because, as you mentioned, related to the find of the rock art in that region, there was also found, actually by the same people, a hieroglyph, with a cartouche, the name of a Middle Kingdom king, Egyptian pharaoh.
So the famous Neolithic North African was clearly a black African. They depicted themselves as such on the cave paintings of the time. And they even interacted peacefully with the Kemetyu ancient Egyptians for millennia. And if you have seen my other video, you would know that the ancient North African black people are the same people who migrated to the Nile Valley. And they are the same people who migrated from Egypt back to West, Central, and the interior of Africa. We have already covered the research from Dr. Nancy Bird on this. There are also clear indications that the Nubio-Kemetic civilization, ancient Egypt, was a pan-black African civilization, and that the civilization really spanned from the western bound of the Sahara to the Nile. And it is only when the Sahara dried up that these black people moved to Egypt.
Grave of a cow was found.
Which is something similar to what you will find in ancient Egypt.
Yes.
Where, like the Serapeum, where there's a whole large, enormous complex with embalmed bulls.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So there are many elements, clearly, of the culture that was operating at Nabta Playa in the earlier time that moved to the Nile Valley and became the ancient Egyptian dynastic civilization.
Let's take a look at what the actual studies say about the genetic makeup of the people they call Neolithic North Africans. Analysis of pre-Islamic invasion and pre-Roman invasion North Africa shows that they were clearly black. If you look at this chart, you will see that multiple studies show that all regions of North Africa and the Green Sahara, yes, the Sahara was green before 4000 BC, that all these regions were populated by black African populations with very low Neanderthal signal. In fact, the very male haplogroup genetic marker of the Nuwayrat mummy is in its highest concentration found where? Let me quote this analysis of genomes of population in North Africa prior to and leading up to 3000 BC. Quote, no Arab signal yet. The characteristic Southwest Asian Y chromosome clades, J1P58, J2AR1A, etc., and West Asian specific autosomal components that surge after the Islamic period are absent, end quote. This means that those who claim to be the ancestors of ancient Egypt did not have their genetic markers present on the scene when the pyramids were built. This confirms what we have been saying, that prior to the Islamic invasion, the typical North African Arab wasn't there. Another quote. European input was coastal and late. This makes sense as it would match what we know of history. Greek immigration and Roman invasion came in very late and was confined to the Mediterranean coast, so no significant presence before 3000 BC. The analysis goes on to say that, quote, black African markers are indeed widespread, from dark-skin pigmentation, malaria-resistant genes, and mitochondrial DNA variants. All these traits were present in the Neolithic North African. These traits are characteristic of black Africans today, too. So they conclude that morphologically and genetically, pre-imperial North Africans were dark-skinned, with tropically proportioned limbs, meaning that the famous term Neolithic North African means nothing more than black African. So then, when they say in the Nature paper that the Nuwayrat mummy is 80% North African, you're telling me that they mean that it is 80% black African? Yes, that is exactly what they are saying. But they are saying it in a way that makes it seem like it is 80% Levantine. Because today we associate North Africans with the people that live there, and not with the people that used to live there. Hey, without history. But what about the other 20%, the Eastern Fertile Crescent signal of Nuwayrat? You are not ready for that conversation yet. One of the most ethnically differentiating traits between humans are the teeth. Show me your teeth and I will tell you which part of the world you descend from. Here, Nuwayrat had a package of generalized African traits. Lack of shoveling and Carabelli, combined with an X plus molar groove, places the individual firmly in the African cluster. Both the Cusp 6 and Cusp 7 defining traits of African populations are present on the Nuwayrat mummy. Okay then. Let's check his head and see what ethnicity it points to. And quoting from the paper where the genotype and phenotype of the Nuwayrat mummy was presented, and I quote, "The skull was dolichocephalic and exhibited a post-bregmatic depression," end quote. Human skull shapes fall in three categories. Dolichocephalic, which show traits of long and narrow, typically aerodynamic, almost gray alien-like skulls. Brachycephalic, which are typically short and broad. And mesocephalic in the middle. It so happens that dolichocephalic heads are very characteristic of Black African or infra-Saharan, often referred to as sub-Saharan African populations. So the shape of the head, too, is Black African. This is beginning to match what we saw of the initial genetic analysis. Let's look at other traits, because maybe the Nuwayrat mummy is one of those odd people who have E1B1B haplogroup, Black African teeth, and Black African skulls, but have traits that are Levantine or European. Analysis of Nuwayrat's major bones and its measurements can give us an indication of whether or not the individual is tropically adapted or not. His brachial index and his crural index are 78.2 and 85.5 respectively. These are ratios of the radius to the humerus and the tibia to the femur respectively. And I quote, "Both lie within or slightly above the upper quartile of ancient Egyptian samples, compiled by Zakrzewski, 2003, and Raxter et al., 2008, and are markedly higher than those of early Europeans, BI approximately 74, CI approximately 80. High distal segment indices are the classic warm climate adaptation predicted by Allen's rule, characteristic of populations from Northeast Africa and the Southern Sahara." End quote. Interesting. So Nuwayrats had tropically adapted proportions, with bone structures in line with Black people south of the Sahara. Same thing with the mouth measurement and jaw ratios, and I quote, "Wide palates are typical of Northeast African and Nilotic groups. European Bronze Age males average approximately 60 millimeters, Levantine early bronze approximately 58 millimeters." End quote. And again here, a robust anterior dental arch again matches ancient Egyptian and Nubian means and exceeds those of most West Eurasians. End quote. Oh, by the way, when they say that Nuwayrat features match typical early ancient Egyptians, they assume that you know that the literature shows that ancient Egyptians cluster most closely to Black Africans from the Horn to Central and South Africa. We have shown this before in earlier videos, so even the mouth, the jaws are African, same with the eyes. With an orbital index of 83.8, Nuwayrat can be qualified as a typical African, with a few whites and Levantine being at the 83 range. Same goes for the cheekbones, classic Black African Nubian cheekbones. I could go on and on, but you get the picture. Pretty much all its features are Black African. But if ancient Egyptians were Black Africans, then it wouldn't just be the genome of the Nuwayrat mummy that would show this. This mummy, in fact, would just be one plot on the multitude of data that we already have from this region and this time period. Let me quote Dr. Christopher Ehret, who in 2023 reported that the physical anthropological findings from the major burial sites of those founding locales of ancient Egypt in the 4th millennium BCE, notably El Badari as well as Nakada, show no demographic indebtedness to the Levant. Ehret specified that these studies revealed cranial and dental affinities with closest parallels to other long-time populations in the surrounding areas of northeastern Africa, such as Nubia. This means that there is already a large amount of study and a large amount of data that clearly shows that ancient Egyptians, especially those living in the important centers of the civilization in the early times, were purely black Africans. Revert any/Arabic mixture. These were the people who started domestic Egypt and built the pyramid. What you will find over the years, especially coming from archaeologists that have lost all moral compass and have an aversion to the truth, a deliberate approach to try and find exceptions and propagate exceptions in fantastic media displays to try and convince everybody that they are representative of the rest of Kemet. But as we will see, even in their willingness to present this mummy as the one that represents the rest of ancient Egypt, they still fail, because the DNA data clearly shows that this man was a pure black man. Let's start with the skin color. There are two major gene variants retrieved from Nuwayrat when it comes to his skin tone. The first one, SLC24A5, RS1426654, has two reported alleles or two reported versions. Version A is reported at 95% in Europe and indicative of lighter skin color, while version G is common in Africa and in parts of Asia where people of very dark skin tones are found. This chart shows where we can find individuals with the G variant of this gene today, and you can see that it is mostly found in black people living south of the Sahara, with groups such as people from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Ghana at the top of the chart, and virtually absent in European populations shown at the bottom of the chart. Well, guess which version the Nuwayrat mummy has? Correct. It has the G allele version of the gene, which is quoted as being associated with a darker skin tone. I mentioned that there are two gene variants that determine skin color that Nuwayrat had. What about the other gene variant? Let's check. The other gene, SLC45A2, also has two alleles or two reported versions, one that is determinative of lighter skin tone, essentially. Having this allele means that your skin would be white, and that is the C allele. This C allele or C version of the gene is most present in Europe and Asia. The other allele, the G allele or G version of the gene, is most present in black Africa and is very determinative of dark pigmented skin. Here again, guess which version of the gene the Nuwayrat mummy had? It had the G version of the gene, the black skin, African version. Combined, these two genes mean that the Nuwayrat mummy had very dark or black skin, absent of any light skin variations. Now I would like to pause here for a second and ask you, have you heard this information anywhere? Did you see any headlines or articles saying that the mummy of a 4,500-year-old black person was just found in southern Egypt? No. Instead, we get this. Is it not strange that a guy whose skin is very black, whose phenotype could not be more black African, is depicted as this and marketed as a Levantine? Completely dishonest. This shows the complete dishonesty of the scientists and archaeologists involved in this study. They found a mummy from the Old Kingdom. They did the DNA analysis and twisted the interpretation to make it seem like this mummy wasn't black. In fact, they didn't even mention black man in their analysis, and in their tables, the black man shows nowhere. Shameful. How can you call yourself a scientist or an archaeologist and publish a figure such as this? When they performed the comparative analysis of the Nuwayrat man, they included the following modern genomes: Caucasian, Anatolian, Levant, Arabian Persian. Where are the Hausa, the Fon, the Kenyans, the Igbos, the Central Africans, the South Africans? Where are the Nubians, the South Sudanese, the Senegalese, the pre-Islamic Niger people? Of course, if these nations are not included in the analysis, the Nuwayrat will automatically cluster to the remaining groups, and thus they can draw the conclusion that they were seeking in the first place. I would love to attribute this to incompetence, but given the long list of scientists listed on that paper, I can only attribute this to an intentional omission intended to divert the attention of the reader. Maybe the hair color genes will tell a different story. Same thing, brown eye alleles and dark to black color hair, all phenotypes that are most frequent in Black Africa. Oh, allow me to demystify the fact that black people only have black hair. That is completely false. If you look carefully, the majority of black people have black to brown hair, especially when the hair is exposed to the sun, and frequent exposure to the sun will cause black African hair to become brown, or in many cases red. Yes, you heard it right. It will go from black to brown to red. Sun exposure isn't necessary, but it helps. So, given what we have seen from his genome and phenotype, the Nuwayrat mummy had very black skin, brown eyes, and black or brown hair, possibly curly hair. Let's ask AI to generate an image of a man with those features and see how closely it matches the image they showed of Nuwayrat. Nah, the Nuwayrat mummy wouldn't look like this guy. This guy looks like a black man, and he looks like he would be lactose intolerant. Oh, really? Let's check. The Nuwayrat man, who was a high-ranking pottery expert during the early dynastic period, was found to have the following gene when it comes to lactose tolerance. LCTRS 4988235. The C allele of this gene, the C version of this gene, is reported to cause adults to be lactose intolerant. Interestingly, the T allele reaches 70 to 90% in Northwest Europeans and some pastoralist groups, but is less than 5% in most infra-Saharan and ancient Near Eastern genomes. That means 95% of black Africans and ancient Near Eastern people were lactose intolerant. And guess which version of the gene the Nuwayrat mummy carried? You guessed it, the lactose intolerant version, which matches black African populations. Did you also catch the fact that ancient Near Eastern populations were lactose intolerant? Like I said at the beginning, many of you are not ready for that conversation yet. The more we dig in, the more evidence we find that the Nuwayrat mummy was a black man. What this also shows is that we need more honest archaeologists and scientists working on ancient Egypt. Because if we don't get honesty in the study of our past, many great discoveries will remain hidden from the public, to the point where many of us who study history suspect that there are chambers and tombs in Kemet that have been discovered with mummies of kings or officials that validate what we already know of the ethnic makeup of the Nile Valley civilization. But these discoveries will never see the light of day. And when you think about it, this pattern of lies and deceit from the mainstream scientific community has caused them to become dogmatic, almost sectarian-like in their approach to truth and knowledge, where they are more ready to assign labels to researchers and facts that differ from their view, rather than debate the merit or error in the proposed theories. And once you have become dishonest, once you have closed your mind to any other possibilities than those you have already spoken, then this dishonesty will carry through many areas of your body of work. And this is exactly what we are seeing with the study of ancient Egypt today, where the most interesting areas where excavation and digs should be performed aren't, where analysis of remains of ancient early dynastic remains aren't pursued. Without History does not accept sponsorship or deals, precisely because we want to remain independent. We want to be able to speak the truth, always. Even if that truth is not comfortable for some in or outside of our community, your support is greatly appreciated. If you want to help this channel, you can do so by clicking the support links in the video description. Or you can go to patreon.com/withouthistory. Even a $1 donation goes a long way to help us bring our truth out and ensure that the next generation doesn't grow up feeling that they are without history. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself. Huge thanks to all my supporters and subscribers.